Matt, I'm here. For some reason, my camera's not working. I'd have to restart my whole computer, so we'll have to live without seeing my beautiful face this morning. Sorry.
No worries.
I'm okay with that, John.
It's very, very magnanimous of you, sir.
I'm often told I have a face for radio, so I don't know. What my mom says, at least.
Pretty brutal.
Finally feels like fall. All right. Let me pull up my attendance thing here. Call the meeting to order. Who are we missing? I think we're pretty much all here. Am I correct? All right. So I'd like to start by thanking Jim for his hard work on the flow chart and ask if everybody got a chance to review that. Thank you for all humoring me last week when we canceled the meeting. I kind of feel like in talking to Jim Paris a little bit, like I think that we're kind of, we're a little bit ahead of some of the other groups. So, we haven't had a group meeting since we started meeting as a subcommittee. So I think it's important that, after tomorrow, I think we'll have a little bit more knowledge of where they are and the path that we're going to take. And I think everything that we've done up to now is kind of self-educating and bringing ourselves all on the same page so we can respond to, kind of what the rest of the group does. So the first thing I'd like to do today is just kind of take us through Jim's outline. And, can I share my screen? Is that something I'm allowed to do here?
Give it a shot. See if you get stopped.
Share screen 2. Got it. All right. So I'm sharing Jim's outline, which I think was really well done. And Bob, you provided a whole bunch of great questions. As we go through this, I think it'd be good if we just kind of take each step and kind of hit our questions as we go. That way we can kind of kill both agenda items at one time. So, Jim, if you don't mind, do you want to walk us right through this process? Turn your mic on and just kind of walk us through. This is the less than 2,000 gallons per day for an existing lot. So this is a piece of land that you own and you want to build a house on. It's just a standalone project.
Yeah, and it's I also call it a lot of record. So it's an existing lot of record, and a developer wants to put a structure out on that building, which requires a septic and a well. Then they would reach out to the health department, or I want to keep everything focused on the Chatham Health District. They would reach out to the Chatham Health District. They apply for an application to conduct soil testing. We would like to get a rough map of where their proposed building is going, where they're looking at the septic system, and the well, because we're not locating the soil testing. We're just going to be out there to record the soil testing. Technically, per the Connecticut Public Health Code, we can be out there to witness it, and somebody else could be reading the test holes, but we will read the test holes, collect the data, and then once the data is collected, then we would type up a site investigation report and send that off to property owner and the engineer. So then we would require that the engineer conduct the perk test. And then once all that information is provided, then we usually get a plan, a plot plan and a house plan or building plan. Will it have to go to planning and zoning? It all depends on what the scenario is. But if you just keep it as a residential house, a plot plan and house plans are submitted, the Chatham Health District would require payment for a review process for that, in which we review the plot plan, make the determination that the plot plan and the septic design and the well match the house plans. If it's a commercial property, we might require that the well could go to be looked at as a public water system. In short, a public water system, a building serving 25 people or more for a 60-day period time would be deemed a public water system. So then they would have to go to the state, fill out a form. The State Department, the state would review the application and make that determination that it is a public well water supply system or it's not. If it is, then they got to go through a phase 1A, phase 1B, and then final will be a phase 2 letter that they would sign off on. Once we review the plot plan, the house plans, and everything's good to go, then we would approve the plot plan. Once the plot plan's been approved, then the well driller can submit a well permit, and the septic installer can come in and apply for a septic permit. Once we issue out the well permit and we issue out the septic permit, we conduct inspections on the septic system. Once that's been approved, then we would request an as-built drawing showing all the important information on the plot plan, house, well, footing drains, etc. We will review that, go out and conduct an inspection, final inspection, walk through the house and make sure that the number of bedrooms coincide with the septic design. Then once we're satisfied with that, then we would issue out the permit to discharge.
What happens if the number of bedrooms in the final house don't match what the septic design was?
Well, then they got two options. One, either they reconfigured the house so that room is not a bedroom. This year, the house plans were that this one room was not going to be a finished room. When I walked through the house, it became a finished room without the building official and or the builder telling me that this unfinished room was now going to be a finished room. This finished room is off a common hallway, more than 70 square feet, had access to a full bathroom. Excuse me. Now this finished room was deemed a bedroom. So they had two options. One, increase the septic system to conform to the number of bedrooms, or reconfigure the upstairs so one of the rooms would not be a bedroom, and they had to reconfigure the room.
Okay. I've had a recent situation where I'm operating in a town that calculates bedrooms much differently than other towns that I've operated in. So like a lot of my homes have a first floor study. It's very common. We want to add this, to a house plan because COVID, everybody wants a first floor study. So it's at the bottom of the staircase on the first floor. Picture Center Hall Colonial. There's a half bath on that same floor, but they count it as a bedroom because you can get to the bathroom upstairs.
I hear you. So
is that legal?
Per the definition of a bedroom in the 2024 technical standards on page 11, A bedroom means those areas within a residential building that are or have the potential to be utilized as a sleeping area on a consistent basis. To be deemed a bedroom, the room shall meet the following following criteria: be a planned habitable or space, or a planned habitable space that has roughly mechanicals. It's got to be 70 square feet, and it has to provide privacy, and it has to have convenient access to a full bathroom. So if this study or office is outside a set of stairs, and you walk up a set of stairs and to the second floor, and right on top of the second floor is a full bathroom, yes, that would, and that office is more than 70 square feet, and you have a 3-foot door opening, yeah, that could be that can be considered a bedroom. What people sometimes, they don't read the entire scenario of a bedroom, and this is coming from my opinion. They miss the last line, which is to be utilized as a sleeping area on a consistent basis. So it all depends on the layout. But if, in order not to be deemed a bedroom, it can't provide privacy, and it would have to have a 5-foot opening. But if that bathroom was not on the top of the stairs, let's say it was down the hallway, is that really convenient? Because convenient here in the technical standards, a full bathroom facility containing either a bathtub or shower are conveniently located to the bedroom served. Convenience in this case means on the same floor as the bedroom or directly accessed from the stairway.
Yes, that direct access that kills us. So, I don't want to digress, but so we didn't put a door on it. It's a cased opening. And they're like, well, you could put a door on it. I'm like, all right, we give up. Just make it a 6-bedroom septic. We're done. So every single home in that community, we just put a 6-bedroom septic on it, right off the bat. And then it saves us the frustration. But any other questions on this first step? Existing lot, conforming lot. This is the easy first step. Bob, do you have feedback on that? I can't pull yours up and this up at the same time.
Yeah,
Go
I can
ahead,
certainly
Matt.
go through some of my questions if you'd like to, but let Matt go first.
Okay, guys, just wanted to add a couple of things. When we're dealing with the potential for a public water system, that's with DPH, okay? So it's in a different group. It's the drinking water section. Just want to add a couple of things. Knowing that process can be quite cumbersome to a developer, my suggestion is always to get that process moving right away. The other thing to note is when I get a property that has a very strong potential to be a public water system, generally speaking, knowing what I know of their requirements, they often require at least 2 wells. And those well radiuses, generally speaking, must be completely within the property boundaries, generally speaking. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning that is because a lot of times we'll get a lot that, of course, when you're developing it, you want to develop it to the greatest potential. So you pretty much have everything developed. And if I see a single well on a property that's pretty much everything's shoehorned in there, which of course you're going to do, you want to maximize your profits, I'm going to not recommend moving forward without having a consult or having some sort of acknowledgement from the drinking water section that they're going to accept that one well. So I just wanted to throw that in the mix, that you have to think about, if you're in a public water system, when you have your own on-site wells, probably if you're the developer, it's a good practice to just straight up just show 2 well locations right out the gate. That would be my recommendation, because at that point, generally speaking, you could probably meet demand with additional storage and things like that. Why do they have 2 wells? Well, it's just one of the things they look at for backups. Sometimes if you have a poor yield on one well, you might not have enough water for the demand. So that's some of the reasons. Just wanted to throw that in there.
What situation would arise that you would be discharging less than 2,000 gallons per day, but require two wells or a public water source? Does that
Well,
happen frequently?
yeah, well, it could because the criteria for public water system is completely different than for a septic system, gallonage for the septic system. It's based on 25 or more people um, utilizing that's the definition for a public water system, 25 or more users and 15 or more service connections. So, um, if you have a housing development, theoretically, 4-bedroom house, that's, it's 5 or 6 houses, you're definitely going to hit that criteria. Um, at 4 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms each, you're gonna be hitting that criteria, and so you might be public water system. Generally speaking, people try to avoid that route. Rightfully so. It's not fun being a public water system. I mean, if you can connect to a water supply, obviously that's the way to go. Or even if you have to invest the money to extend a water main, oftentimes that's a cheaper option to do. So that would be your scenario. It's 25 or more people.
Jim?
Um, a restaurant would be a building that would be designed being less than 2,000 gallons per day discharge for the sewage, but would be a public water supply.
Or an office building?
An office building, that's a possibility. So the best scenario would be a restaurant would fall into that category.
Okay. Thank you. Bob?
Yeah, so I guess everybody saw my email from over the weekend, and this was just sort of some really kind of detailed technical stuff of just how we do things and why we do things in a certain manner, and whether it's an appropriate way to do it or if is there room for improvement in areas. And I think we can talk about this from the individual lot basis, but I think a lot of my comments also fall under subdivisions as well, which is kind of the preliminary testing when we're trying to get a lot or lots in a subdivision approved. You're doing the preliminary testing, but you don't really have the actual site plans done. So it seems like it's a two-step process, and I don't know if there's a way to simplify that. You certainly don't want to approve a whole bunch of lots with only a 1 or 2 bedroom septic when everybody knows we're going to try to build 3 and 4. But you never really know until you're doing the formal site plan how large a house it is, how many bedrooms it's going to have. So there's just this redundancy that, is time consuming for both the local health district, but also for the developer with his engineering staff and so forth. So I just didn't know if there was a way to simplify that process. And along those same lines, I've never really known if it's in the public health code or not that most towns are requiring 2 test pits in the primary, one in the reserve. But then, Matt, I know we've talked in the past about the reserve area sort of kind of goes away once you develop the site. And so it's like, I'm always wondering like how much time and effort we should be putting into approving the reserve area that's probably never going to be used. So those are just sort of some of the things. And then we get into just the timing issues of, the reviews and whether they can be done in a concurrent process instead of consecutively just to speed up the process, how fees are set, um, and again, really some technical stuff about just when select fill is placed and the protection of the septic areas during construction. Some towns are really strict, or some health districts are really strict about roping them off or barricading them, and others are just like, go do whatever you want and we'll get the system done. And I know obviously you can compact the soil and make a big mess out of a system. And I've heard that argument, but then they don't make you protect the reserve area because again, that's not never going to get used anyway. So there's just a whole bunch of like kind of questions along those lines that I was kind of throwing out here. And I just don't know if Matt or Jim, if you guys have any thoughts or anybody else does on just why we do it the way we do it. Is there room for improvement, or do we have a perfect system now? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong. I'm just kind of raising the questions.
Yeah, you have a lot there, so I'll try to go through them. So with the reserve, generally speaking, what you can do, the reserves oftentimes are down gradient, just down gradient from the primary. So when we talk about having at least 2 test pits for the primary system, that would entail at least one in the actual area of the system itself, and then something down gradient, which would then almost knock out the reserve as well. So a lot of times you're not really doing, I would say most of the time, you're not doing a lot additional testing for the reserve because, again, due to its proximity to the existing system, oftentimes you kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Now, that's not the case, obviously, if you put the reserve somewhere else on the property. That would obviously be somewhat redundant, and I would agree with you there. Just one of the quick things about soil testing, too, is it's oftentimes the consistency of the results that will dictate how many tests. So the more consistent the soil is in a given area, the less likely we need more results. But if we're starting getting lots of wide amounts of variation, you may have to do more than 2 or 3 test pits for a leaching system. The other thing too is, and hopefully we're trying to teach the sanitarians this, but we often say that, when you're out doing testing, try to get everything done now. Last thing we want is to have to burden somebody to pay the cost of going back out after the fact. But like you said, Bob, the thing is, oftentimes we don't know if we're going to develop this area or that area. But in some cases, it might be cheaper just to actually do the testing there, even if there's just a remote possibility that we may develop a certain area. That's certainly cheaper than having somebody come back out again and pay the cost of having that soil testing done. I don't know. I'm trying to think of what the other questions were, though, if you want to shoot those again. Or did I hit them?
Let me see. So primary testing action and site plan. I guess there's no way, I don't know of any way around not doing it in a 2-step process, doing the testing to sort of approve a lot and then actual formal site plan once you determine what house you're proposing for a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, sometimes if they're just looking for preliminary subdivision approval, they're just knocking out a couple of test holes. But you could almost do it, again, it's a roll of the dice. Perhaps you can get it right the first time and show enough test holes, to minimize the amount or maybe even eliminate the ability or cause to actually go back out there and do additional testing. But yeah, you're going to get that 100% of the time, probably not.
Yeah, and sticking with the single lot, we're gonna get to the subdivision, but sticking with that single lot. When you do have somebody who comes in for their septic fail or they need to replace their system, and we're gonna get the next slide, the next page is this case where you're adding a bedroom or you're adding on, and you have to redo your field. How frequently do people utilize that secondary area when they're replacing a system versus removing the existing system and replacing it in the place of the primary system?
Good question. So real quick. So as Bob kind of pointed out earlier, reserve areas, the idea of a reserve area, because of the fact that the minute you get the C of O, for the dwelling, you will no longer have to maintain the reserve area. Our idea of what the reason for a reserve area is if something goes awry during the construction process, and I've seen that. And Bob again alluded to the fact that you want to protect the leaching area, and you guys know you have different contractors from different fields going over different aspects that have no clue of anything about a septic system, and they could drive over it, store equipment on areas and things like that. So that is really the primary function of the reserve area, is during the construction process. If something goes awry, we have plan B. It's not perfect, but it's at least something. Now, to answer your specific question, Matt, absolutely, you're right. Most of the time, much of the time, I should say, we do go in the existing area. That's assuming that was chosen correctly the first time around. That's not always the case when you have a system that's 50, 60 years old or more. Back in the day when they would basically fill in a wetland and put a septic system. So that's probably not going to work there, although maybe the entire lot looks like that. But for the most part, most of the time, yeah, I would say at least 80% of the time we're going in the same area. So yeah, and that's why the reserve is mostly for during the construction process, not for a future failure or an expansion.
that's really good information because I don't think that planning and zoning and wetlands understand that dynamic. I
Mhm.
don't think that it's widely understood that that reserve area is reserved for the initial construction, not reserved for the life of the property.
Correct.
Because that's pretty important to note because a lot of times, people be like, well, we'll get a hard time about our reserve not being, you know, being, not well enough defined, or we did park something there on the reserve, even though we have our primary all cordoned off. Like a lot of times I've run into issues with the town saying my reserve is not adequate anymore during construction, but is a reserve for construction. So that's very interesting.
I just want to
Um,
mention one other thing, Matt, though some jurisdictions can be more stringent. So, for instance, Weston Westport or Aspetuck Health District, they actually, I believe, they require you to maintain that reserve system beyond us. So just keep that in mind, you guys. And I think Bob also alluded to Greenwich. I'm thinking of Greenwich, how they cordon off. They actually make you put fencing around the leaching system during construction. So yeah, you may get some variations with that if it's within an ordinance. Sometimes it's just policy, which could be definitely challenged. But if
yeah,
it's in an ordinance, not so much.
and a local town can make an ordinance that makes septics more constrained. Is
Yeah, that's a
that
good question.
allowable?
Yeah, so here's the deal, though. It can be more stringent, but not contradictory. There was a story of, and it's in my territory, is the town of Sherman. And they had this ordinance that said if you exceeded a certain slope on the property, you could not develop it. And we're talking decades and decades, people just respected that. And there was a young, savvy engineer that challenged that. And they won because the attorney said it was deemed contradictory. So, in other words, to deal with the slope in our code, it says if you exceed a certain slope, becomes an area of special concern, which means you simply just have to have it engineered. They took it upon themselves and said you can't develop the property at all. So that actually, from a legal perspective, and again, my understanding was that it was considered contradictory and it was overturned. That's why oftentimes, or we do tell the locals that when they do want to form an ordinance, they should come to our office first. We will vet it through our legal department to make sure that they don't do a situation like Sherman did. Some of them do, some of them don't. But yeah, they have to be careful. They can be more strict. They could have said, well, at a certain percentage of slope, you have to have the engineer out there during construction, that kind of thing. But to actually say you cannot develop the property was deemed contradictory and it was overturned.
That that's one of those things that's very concerning to a developer is having a town with different laws than basically the whole state.
You got to do
Um,
your homework ahead of time
yeah,
and hash that out.
and it almost seems like a town could do that in order to limit housing opportunity, um,
Well, I'll,
versus
I'll tell
in
you
the
what.
interest of septic
Yeah,
safety.
we try to put a stop to that. I'll give you a couple other examples too with nitrogen. You know, you can't midstream during a project tell a developer all of a sudden now that we're going to make nitrogen requirements midstream during a project. You can't do that. And so, you have to, and you can't be subjective to this property versus the next. You have to do a town-wide type of thing. So yeah, we've had to pull the reins on some local jurisdictions for some of that kind of stuff too, and say, hey guys, you can't do that. You can't be discriminatory, to somebody just because you got opposition to the property, and all of a sudden now we're changing the rules midstream. You can't do that.
Yeah, Jim, you're on mute.
The town of Glastonbury has the town ordinance that you have to be 5 feet. The bottom of the leaching system has to be 5 feet above ledge, where the technical standards says you have to be 4 feet above ledge. So just to give you an idea of how a town has an ordinance which exceeds the public health code. Town of Glastonbury has one concerning the depth of ledge above the bottom of the leaching system.
So I would ask, why are they allowed to do that? Because there's probably the science that the state has put forth, the guidelines the state has put forth, and saying this is the science that supports 4 feet above ledge is adequate. Why do we allow a town, that would be contradictory in my opinion. Why do we allow a town to come up with their own science and their own methods?
Well, that's a good question. I can answer that, and I'll try to be brief. They could argue that we have some unique circumstances in town, some unique environmental conditions, unique this, unique that. And so I think and it's not what Jim just cited. I have many towns, and it sounds like both you guys work out in my territory, Fairfield County, where they increase the separation of groundwater. It's 24 inches, 36 inches in some cases. So it's very similar to what Jim just said. It's based off of whatever they come up with in town. But yeah, that I don't believe would be considered contradictory. Um,
Adam?
I'd also like to point out that this isn't unique to the, public health code, or public health statutes. This is something we see throughout, the interaction between state statutes and local ordinances. I've heard similar questions brought up about, some years ago when some towns were trying to institute like plastic bag bans before the state did it, or can local jurisdiction, what kind of gun laws over and above the state statute can like local jurisdictions. I've heard debates around those too. So this is general. This isn't specific to these principles that we've been discussing here aren't necessarily specific to public health laws. It's the interaction of any state law with any town ordinance as well. So it's maybe a broader conversation of just how state law interacts with municipal ordinance, because all the principles apply throughout.
Yeah, and before I go to Bob, that's one of the things that builders love is the building code is the building code is the building code. And the town of Southbury can't come out and say, you know what, we only want to see homes built with 2x6 construction. 2x4 construction is out. They can't do that. Like, and I think that's part of what I'm trying to get to with this is like, I want a firm set of rules that I can follow. But go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, Matt, you actually just answered exactly what I was going to say is that we love the consistency of the building code. There's one code. We don't have to worry about an inspector going, that's not how we do it in our town. And that doesn't mean there can't be variations in the overall code. Like for coastal areas, there used to be a high wind area down New London area, or Stonington area. And Matt, we could do something like that for nitrogen, where if we're so many feet from Long Island Sound or a tributary to Long Island Sound or, something like that. So it doesn't have to say that we're going to deal with nitrogen the same everywhere, but the state would have rules of where we deal with nitrogen in certain ways and where we don't, if that were the case. But I would love to, just as Matt said, have a consistent policy or program that this is how we do it everywhere. There's not any other way of doing it. It's not to the discretion of the local sanitarian or health district. And I think that goes sort of to my point about just what's the time frame for review and fees and so forth. I'd love to see a consistency there. Now, some people would argue that I work in a town that has really low fees or turns them around in 3 days, and I don't want to give everybody 30 days to do it because some guys are great at doing it. There are other towns that just take forever, and it's just the way their process is. And it could be staffing, it could be financial. And I think health districts are probably a little more flexible because they typically have a little larger staff. So when an emergency comes up, they're pulling one person. When you're talking about an individual town with one sanitarian or one director of health, and they take vacation, well, their department shut down for 2 weeks. That's just what happens. But I would love to see some sort of consistency both in the rules and in the process of how things are processed and the timing of those processes and what fees we pay to have those things done. And I think that would be great if that came out of this working group as a goal. And I don't know if you guys have reasons that you would not want that to happen, if there's something that I'm not thinking about that you want to allow that flexibility, but in my mind, I'd love to eliminate all those kinds of things.
All right, I think I'm trying to figure out if Jim or Matt was first.
Don't let Matt go.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I would like to do for our program, and to your guys' point, is I want to avoid the inconsistencies and enforcement with our sanitarians. And you're right. I mean, and it boils down to training and personality. And I personally would like to get our team out there more often for training. And unfortunately, we don't have the resources to do that. But I think that would help a little bit to mitigate some of those differences that you guys experience, which can be very frustrating. And I get that, going to one town and all of a sudden this one is enforcing this and the other one didn't even look at it. And I get that's can be very frustrating. And on my end, guys, is something I would like to do more often, get better training. So that way, when you guys go to this town, you get treated consistently for the same issues. So it's been difficult. I think I've already expressed to you guys that, my program consists of really 4 distinct separate programs. So it's tough to get out there and do that kind of training. We were looking at a few years ago, there was this field training is one of the biggest things that we're lacking. The state of Connecticut obviously doesn't have the resources to do that. There was a company, or actually a licensed installer / pumper up in the north central Connecticut, Ellington area, that actually did a facility and wanted to do the training and started doing it. They actually had septic tanks set up outside, half buried. How do you conduct an inspection? Showing you these physical components in the ground, something that we can't do. And unfortunately, we put in for the funding for grants for that, and that fell through. But that's the kind of thing I think we need more of on my end. Like, what we need to do better is to get the training out there so you guys get consistency with the sanitarians and how they're enforcing this stuff.
Yeah, Jim?
That there is the consistency throughout the state of Connecticut, okay? That is the 2024 technical standards. Also, section 1913 B103 and 1913 B104. Every health department, every sanitarian has this regulation. There's a consistency. How they interpret it, that's another story. But we all have that as our rules and regulations that we have to follow. Okay, other than if a local ordinance is in place. Okay, so we have the consistency of the regulations and technical standards. Why we don't follow that is, you're right. It's up to how we got educated. What we see is more important than something else, and it could be also an attitude. But we should be professionals, and we should be following that requirements. As far as funding, look, the Chatham Health District funding is from the state, per capita from the state based on population. And it would be based on a census. And I apologize, I don't know what census they're using, but we get per capita from the state. Then, using the same census, we get money per capita for each of the towns. Then we get permit fees, and we get grants. And that is our source of income into the Chatham Health District. As far as, I don't know if money comes from, and maybe Matt can help me out before I stick my foot in my mouth. I don't know, money comes from the federal government, if they comes to DEEP, and is DEEP supposed to, send that, funnel that down. I don't know if that occurs, or if it does occur at all.
Jim, you don't collect any fees on behalf of the state. Your fees that you collect are all used in-house, right?
No, we collect per capita. So let's say the Chatham Health District has 60,000 people in the 6 towns that we have. And then at one time we were getting $1.25 from the state per capita. I think that has dropped. And then we charge an equal amount per capita uh, per town. And I don't know what we charge at that, but those are our big main fees along with the permits and grants.
All right, I don't want to get totally sidetracked. I think these conversations are awesome. I'm trying to make as many notes, and then we'll go back through this and try to pull them together. But Bob, I'm going to call on you, but then I want to try to get back to the flow chart, and then we'll keep entertaining these questions. But go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, just real quick, Matt. Part of we're supposed to be processing funding, so I think we should be coming out with a recommendation that we get more funding. I was shocked when Matt told us that there's only 3 or 4 staff people on the whole septic side of things, and you're wearing 3 or 4 other hats besides dealing with septics, Matt. So I think additional staffing should definitely be on the table for both. Well, primarily I'm thinking for DPH, but also maybe if we recommend some sort of training coming out of DPH, that there's some reimbursement to the towns or health districts for sending their people to the training or something, so that I think we can look at that both ways. We want better training so we have better results. So we need better skills. So let's make sure that all happens. And I think that's part of our purview. And I think that's definitely something that should be in our final recommendations. I don't know what those numbers are, exactly what it is, but I think that's a conversation we need to have before we're done.
Yeah, especially as these statutes change the area of responsibility, shifting even more, responsibility onto DPH away from deep, and then more onto the locals as well. But that's a unfunded requirement for the locals to meet. So like that definitely should be part of this conversation. I'm going to just grab the next page here is less than 2,000 gallons per day. This is a change to a property, either adding a pool, a kitchen, a bathroom, some type of change that happens to a existing building or conversion. Do you want to walk us through this real quick, Jim?
All right. Section 1913B100A, change of use. So there are four sections in there: building conversion, building additions, accessory structures, and sewage disposal area preservations. Okay. Building conversions, once you increase the design flow of a building, that's a building conversion. At least you have to show a code compliant leaching area, and at least meeting. We try to look at the code compliant leaching area has to meet 100% of the requirements for the installation of a septic system, which also includes the proper design of a septic tank. So if you had a seasonal cottage and now you want to go year-round use, that's going to be a building conversion. If your design flow is increasing more than 50%, then the local health department can require the installation of the code compliant leaching area that meets 100% of the design criteria. Building addition, if you want to add a kitchen, then you got to make sure that it meets the separation distances, and that at least you can show at least 50% of a code compliant leaching area. Sheds, attached decks, same thing. Other than that, I think if a little more leeway if we don't have any soil testing, and that the shed or the accessory structure is not going to affect the potential reserve area for the property. And the sewage disposal area preservation, that's the toughest one, because a lot of town planners and zoning officials was totally ignore the health department because, oh, it's the first cut. So if the first cut is allowed, you don't need to go in front of planning commission for a first cut. but the zoning official and or planner failed to realize that if you're taking this 10 lot subdivision or 10 lot parcel that has a house on it, and now you split it in half to make 2 5 lots, then that lot now with the house, that lot becomes smaller, and they have to show a code compliant leaching area on their property and maintain the proper separation distances from the property lines for the existing septic system. So I always have a hard time catching up on that one.
We actually had a situation where we were adding land to somebody's property because they had an encroachment onto our property. We just gave them a lot line revision. And it ended up not happening because they didn't have proper reserve or separation from, not proper reserve, their separation from their primary system was too close to the existing property lines already. And like the whole thing just got all bound up, and finally we're just like, just ignore it. And so we just ignored it, didn't give them the land, and removed the obstruction, the encroachment, and then everybody was fine. But we were trying to give them more land, and it didn't happen. So the steps here are basically, you know, what you just kind of walked us through. Anything that we want to focus on in this area? Does this happen a lot more down in Fairfield County, where people are trying to take a single lot and then make it into, you know, 2 homes, that kind of thing? Go ahead, Matt. You're on mute.
Thank you. To summarize this, bottom line is if you do activities on the property that may have an effect on your septic system, we want to make sure that you don't end up shooting yourself in the foot by taking away area that you might otherwise have needed during the repair. So that's the ballpark summary right there. Does it happen? No, this is all over the state. Yes, Fairfield County tends to have more activities because there's more money down there. But, you know, anybody, anywhere in the state, this is subject to, by the way, and also the code complying area could be your existing system. So if you just put in a system 10 years ago and there's a file in it, they pull it out and they say, does it meet the code, and you're not increasing the flows, you're done. You don't have to do anything. When you have to do something is if it's a property that the septic hasn't been touched in 40 years, there's nothing in the file, we know nothing. At that point, it's probably not a bad idea to get this information anyway. At least you'll have a plan B ready to go. Should your system fail, you won't have to necessarily retest. You'll have all this information in the file. So yeah, this is one of the things Jim would agree with me on. You spend an awful lot of time with people because homeowners get very upset with this kind of thing. So we know how we respond.
On this, just a follow-up question on this. Do you have to show a reserve?
No.
Okay. So the reserve is not required.
Correct. Although, unfortunately, they use the incorrect terminology many times, and many districts will call that a reserve. That's not a reserve. It's called a B100A, either a system or repair system, and it can be your existing system. No reserve required.
Okay. Bob?
Yeah, this may go exactly opposite of what I just said about consistency across the state. This tends to be more subjective, and maybe we want to allow this because I think it's something where it's very unique to the individual property. And so maybe it needs to be allowed to be more subjective so that you guys can make a decision what's the appropriate way to handle these kind of things.
Yeah, and honestly, this is something that I want to do more trainings of for the locals to get somewhat consistency. You are right. These are subjective, but there is some elements that we could take the subjectivity out of. I'm not going to get into the weeds on it, but yeah, I'm in agreement with you. And sometimes that works to your benefit. You know, there's a unique situation, unique circumstances that we can get it to work for you because of this one unique condition on your property.
Matt, would there be a potential for like a review, like to bring this, if we don't like the response we're getting from the local health district, that we could bring it to your office for a further review? Is there a process already in place for that?
Good question. So 2 things. Number 1, the locals are not shy about contacting us on this, and oftentimes they will just on the side and say, hey, are we doing this right? And so this more of an informal process is already in place. However, if you are unhappy, or you or your client is unhappy, there is a process where they formally deny it. The locals formally deny it, and there's an appeal process, which actually works pretty good. And what it is there's hearing officers up at the state. They don't talk to us, and they strictly, which they're attorneys, and they strictly look at the book of rules, what you want to do, and they make a decision on it. And so there is that process that you can go through. And it sounds cumbersome, but actually it can work fairly quickly. I'm told that within a few weeks to a month, you can get that hearing set up. And, and depending on, now, oftentimes I will tell people straight up, you got no prayer. And I work with the locals on that too. Because if it's clear cut, they're attorneys. They're not going to look at these mitigating circumstances and other things. They're just going to say, this is what the rules say. This is what you got. If you don't meet it, you don't get it. And so, but there are sometimes situations where they have a case and they potentially can get it overturned.
Great. And Matt, as far as I'm concerned, I don't really see any major problem with the way this is currently functioning. So this area, I think, is okay in my mind. I'm not
It
hearing
is,
anything.
except for the fact that I would like to get my office out there and do more trainings on this to get better consistency with how this is enforced. That would be my only critique on that. And we do have presentations to go through some of that, again, to try to eliminate some of the subjectivity.
Which would then in turn generate less formal appeals.
Absolutely. It would be good for everybody.
Okay.
Do we have a basic sense of what that would take from a cost or manpower standpoint? Like, to basically when you'd have a circuit rider training local districts or local departments.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard for me to speculate on that, but we do have a lot of stuff that we've sent management as to what we feel we need for resources to accomplish certain things. So, I mean, we could probably get something together with that. I mean, the biggest thing that was unfortunate is that training that we had ready to go with that outside provider. So right now we're in the midst of rewriting our certification process, and we'd like to include trainings in that. We didn't get the go-ahead for CEUs on that, but we can do it informally. But yeah, that we could probably work on getting what we feel is necessary to accomplish this.
Matt, if you were looking for something in-house, were you thinking it's like a full-time position or a half-time position? I'm just trying to get a grasp what kind of what John's saying is just how big is the problem, or how much time would you need to get to all the health districts over the course of a year?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you want me to step back and I'd be perfectly frank with you, I would think that I would like to be able to focus on maybe one or two programs rather than four. I think that would be my first recommendation. And getting bodies immediately, as you guys all know, it doesn't help right away. It takes 6 months to a year sometimes to train people, and the quality of people you're getting now is subpar at best. So even if we did get additional bodies and staffing, it would take some time. But yeah, that would be the direction to go, would be to actually have individuals assigned that can focus exclusively on these topics rather than having to spread yourself out, which is what we're doing right now, between things that have nothing to do with one another. And it's difficult to keep track of myself as a supervisor to go from pools to septic systems to dead body matters to campgrounds. Those are basically completely unrelated matters. And it's tough to keep all that tracked and to go right down to it. The way our program was historically functioned too, by the way, was the program supervisor was working level 2, which I still am. So it's not that I'm just a supervisor. I'm actually doing the work as well. I have my own region and everything else. So, I can't just delegate stuff because my staff are going full bore right now with everything.
That's interesting. So you'd really be a proponent of subject matter experts. So you have two people that are doing all the septics and somebody who does all the, human remains and, that kind of stuff instead of, each one of your team members being all facets of Department of Health for that area.
Right. And I think that a supervisor really, it's difficult to, for a supervisor to basically, I'm acting as a manager more than a supervisor because I have all these different programs. But yet I still have to do the work as well. So it's tough. So I think it's more than just, it would be, I think that some of the programs should be migrated in different places, but I mean, I can't, a way that could either have their own supervisor and they can get the attention they need. That to me would be the best outcome. And then obviously to staff up the programs under a single supervisor that has maybe one or two programs under them rather than four. That to me would be the ideal, and we can focus on things like training and getting this information out and things like that we haven't been able to do. And the other thing we often did too was we used to do a lot of technical assistance, which meant literally going out in the field and working with the locals and the developers and everybody else when they get in a bind. We just don't have the time to do that now. So what happens with that? The things escalate and they get political sometimes, and it's just a mess for our department. They end up getting, coming through the commissioner's office, the governor's office, and so we would like to nip that stuff in the bud rather, at the ground level, before the things escalate, by being able to get out in the field more often and hopefully resolve these issues before they get out of control. Historically, that's what we did. We're not able to do that now.
We're coming up on our hour here, and I think it's important we maintain our hour cadence. But would it be possible for next week's meeting? We're going to pick right up where we left off. I'll redo the agenda. We'll pick up with subdivisions, and we'll go through the rest of Jim's flow chart. But would it be possible for you to bring like a organizational chart for the health department that you could share and kind of walk us through, how it all works? So we can see supervisors, we can see, the director of public health, like all the way down, just so we can see how it's organized.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely an org chart for the department. I mean, I could probably, one that would be most relevant would be just my branch, which is environmental health and drinking water. That probably would be the one. You wouldn't really need to see anything beyond that, I wouldn't think.
I don't need to see kitchens and other stuff, but if we could, yeah, that would be really.
Yeah, or just
that would be great. If
Sure.
you could bring that to the next meeting and share, we'll let you share your screen. You can kind of just walk us through,
okay.
where the workload is and where you're looking for that funding, that extra body, that extra half body. That I think that would be really helpful to us to understand, kind of what you're dealing with.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Matt, yeah, I agree. Just your section, not the entire public health department. That's probably, I don't know, hundreds of people maybe, but yeah, your area of focus.
Yeah, and I actually have basically write-ups that explain what our responsibilities are that are already done. So I mean, I have to obviously vet this through my managers, but I'd be happy to provide it. But we'll see what they're going to allow me to set for it. But I can't imagine they would have a problem with it. It just simply says what we do.
Absolutely. That's amazing. That'd be great if you could share that with us next week.
Sure.
All right. Is there any other comments? I was a little bit afraid, like, how much depth are we going to go into as we go through these? And we got through 2 pages, so in an hour. So next week we'll hit them a little bit more, and then we'll get to Matt's presentation on the org chart. But look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow on the meeting with the rest of the team, and look forward to hearing what they have to say. Unless there's anything else.
Yeah, no, thanks,
Are we
Matt.
all-
This is John. I just want to also note that we're, a couple of us are meeting with some of the legislative leaders, Kristen McCarthy Vahey, tomorrow morning, and we're gonna sort of redouble our efforts to make sure that we get DEP in this committee also. I think there's been some slowdown administratively, but we need DEP at the table, so we'll work on that.
At least, I think we're proving that maybe we don't need them, but once we make some recommendations and then to have them chime in on that recommendation without ever being here, it'll be an issue. So,
Yeah.
having them at the table is huge. So thanks. Let me know how that goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right,
This
guys.
has been
Thank you
great.
very
Thanks,
much.
Matt.
Good conversation today.
Absolutely.
Guys.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Yep.